Well, welcome back, Matthew Flynn. How are you today?
Doing good, man. How are you doing?
Good. I'm super happy with the weather. I was saying this to Leo yesterday. Finally, we're en route for summer. But you see, next week they're calling for snow
No, I did not know that.
at like +10. What's the point of it?
I don't care if it's like snowing or raining as long as there's like some sunlight.
Fair, yeah, that's exactly it, which hopefully there is. But so let's talk programming and nutrition for both hypertrophy and fat loss. And we'll start with hypertrophy. And the reason being is because I kind of been waiting to say like this analogy. I thought about it is most people are focused on fat loss, right? Most people want to obtain this physique, beach bod, however you want to call it. But the more muscle you have, the easier it could be to achieve fat loss. So in this instance, we want to expend more fuel. So would you rather have a Prius or would you rather have a Big Mac truck, right? And so which one's going to use more fuel? And so that's why I think hypertrophy should be more of a focus, especially for females. I think because they're in fear of, improper weight gain or not entirely sure how to go about a caloric surplus. So I figured this is a great opportunity to educate people, using each other's modalities, and just, providing some information so people aren't so lost within Google on what to do and everything. So for you, when it comes to hypertrophy, what are some of your basic, generalized strategies that you use to help people build muscle?
Yeah. So I think it's kind of important to discuss some of the important variables that go into hypertrophy and building muscle. I think like the first thing I like to discuss with people is kind of volume. So kind of figuring out how many sets per week roughly we should be doing to kind of induce the muscle building signal. And for most people, I kind of like to have them start anywhere from 60 to 80 sets of total working sets per week. And then based on the response to that, we can go down or we can go up depending on that. And then in terms of another important variable that I like to kind of hash out with people is like determining how many days per week they should be training to get them the results that they want. And typically I like anywhere from kind of 4 to 5 days per week, sometimes even 3, just depending on the individual schedule. So if say someone's doing 60 sets per week, over the course of 4 days, they'll be doing about 15 working sets per workout. If they're doing 3, it'd be 20. If it's 5 times per week, it would be roughly 12 sets per workout. So like that's kind of my general setup for someone like looking to get started on building muscle. And then in terms of another important variable to consider when you're kind of putting together a hypertrophy plan is determining how many times per week you're kind of hitting a particular muscle group. And over the years, I used to kind of think that it was better to do between 2 to 3 times per week in terms of hitting a particular muscle. But over the years, I've realized that it doesn't really matter. What it comes down to is like how many total sets per muscle group are we getting over the course of the week. So if someone wants to train a muscle group 2 or 3 times over the course of the week, that's awesome. But if someone also wants to train that muscle group just over the course of one session, at the end of the day, the results are going to be very similar.
Okay. So I want to tap on, because I know this is a question that I've been asked in the past, is like working sets. Because let's say you have a program written out and you're doing like a dumbbell chest press and you got 5 sets or whatever. To you, what's defined as a working set for those that don't understand? Because I know like if you were to go, because some people think that's like failure. So if you did failure on all 5 sets, that's quite a bit of volume. So how do you define working sets for your clients?
So like, I guess over the last couple of years, people have started to talk about kind of effective reps, and that's kind of defined as like the last 5 reps of a set right before the point of kind of maximal failure. So in my eyes, generally speaking, a working set is something that's like relatively close to failure, typically anywhere from 3 to 1 reps away from failure. And that's in the context of technical failure. So the first rep needs to look like the last rep, and when we can no longer kind of maintain that standardization of the rep, that's when that to me is when you continue to do more reps, but at a change in technique or tempo. That's when I start to consider that to be beyond failure training, because it's not the same kind of standard that you set at the start of the set.
And yeah, a very simplistic way that I'll explain that for people that may not understand is, let's say you're doing a bicep curl and your upper back is engaged and your arms are nice and stable at your side, well, all of a sudden, if you start moving at the shoulder joint, when most people pick their elbows up, that's kind of coming out of that technique because now you're starting to rely on other muscles and you've already potentially reached failure within the bicep, for example, but you're just digging a little bit further because you're gaining support from other systems. And so that, to me, that I love that the technique break, the execution break, I think is a really good sign for failure. Another one that I use too is because, you have individuals such as ourselves where, I gotta say, we got pretty good technique, we could sit there and hold that position and not break in technique, but we could really slow in velocity. And so I know for myself personally, if I really begin to slow in velocity, so my reps are not moving at the same speed as they were the first couple reps, that to me, I'm reaching failure.
That's something when I'm training my own clients. I'll watch the rep speed. That's like a good marker for me to know how far they are away from failure. And some people will just quit and the rep speed didn't change at all. And that's why I know it's largely more psychological than actual muscular failure.
So you mentioned that you have been working with a little more online of late. So how do you, between in-person and online, how would that programming differentiate? And are you compensating for the fact that you're not there maybe, or how would you write a program for an online versus one that you are training in person?
So typically the online people that I work with, they have a little bit more experience in the weight room. So they're a little more familiar with exercises. They're a little bit more familiar with kind of following a program. And then the people that I work with in person, they tend to be a little bit more greener. They train a little less frequently. So they're only training twice per week. Whereas the people online, they're training anywhere from kind of 4 to 6 times per week. So because of the difference in the amount of training, the type of split that we'll be doing is going to be much different. So in person is typically either going to be full body workouts or upper lower splits. Whereas the people online training 4 to 6 times per week, that's what we'll start to incorporate more kind of push pull legs, bro splits, more kind of individual body parts, just because typically at the same time they have more experience in the gym, but they also, they're typically a little more advanced than the people coming to me in person. Okay.
So building off of that advance, because for example, you and I have discussed this before, someone with more muscle mass is going to get a lot more done in 5 reps than someone with lesser muscle mass. And with them being online and you can't physically see, so going back to failure, we can understand that, okay, yes, their technique could be very good, but would they potentially be those ones to dig into that failure via the slow velocity? So is there markers that you use to dictate? I personally try to get clients to send me workout videos. And it's a pain. It's a very big pain in the butt because none of them want to do it, understandably so, especially if you're in a gym. It can be awkward filming yourself, not to mention the whole Joey Swole trend right now. So I don't...
What's this Joey Swole?
You don't know the trend?
No, I don't.
Oh, people are filming in the gym and then they'll do something bad and then he'll come on and just scold them and then make fun of them. It's great. It's actually amazing. Gotcha. It's a really big gym movement. It's very positive.
Cool.
It's very positive. But anyways, so for me, because I'll see clients and it's okay, I constructed this workout program with an expectation, and when they check in, that expectation is not there. What markers do you use? Because trying to explain somebody online, what they should be doing, I find is a lot more difficult. So what methods do you use to figure out if someone's digging too deep into failure, excessive volume?
Yeah, so that's where we start to, I'm huge on the videos, but like you said, it can be hard to get videos from clients. I guess it really comes down to the individual. If I know someone's really kind of gung-ho on pushing hard on a lot of sets, then someone will start to incorporate more kind of RPE based sets. So rather than having them do all their sets to technical failure, I'll put RP for 7 for the first set, 8 for the second set, 9 for the third, and then failure for the last set. So the average of those 4 kind of RPs, which is essentially it stands for the rate of perceived exertion. So the average of that will be kind of a couple reps below failure for that entire kind of exercise. Whereas I have other people who I know aren't pushing it hard enough, I'll essentially have them take all their sets to failure because I just know that they're always leaving 5 or 6 or 7 reps in the tank. So it comes down to essentially learning about that individual and what makes them tick.
Yeah, and that's where, like I said, even if you got one set of videos, that is enough that, with your experience, that it's like, okay, I can understand that this individual like this, or, sometimes like, because you get, like, I personally have clients from all over the place, but sometimes you'll get ones that are still within Canada or Alberta, and they'll be in Calgary one day, and I'll train them in person. Then I actually physically see, and then the programming becomes so much more effective after that, because then you know exactly what to do. Right? Because, you have individuals where you, like, lay out this workout program, and they come in and you look at their body composition, they're like, what'd you do this week? Like, and it's kind of like, not knocking them or anything, but it's like there's a misunderstanding in there, which is something that online coaches really struggle with.
And I think, like, I've thought about that when I first got started. I used to kind of put the blame on the clients, but however, like, I just realized that it wasn't me. I was doing a poor job of communicating with them and relaying kind of what I wanted them to execute. That's where I kind of came up with a little bit of like an FAQ kind of based form that they can look at, and it kind of gives them like general answers to like frequently asked questions, and also like things in terms of like how I want them to execute the sets, how close to what is failure, like just like the basics, so they can have a better understanding, and hopefully that will help guide them a little better.
It's a really good idea. I like that, actually. I should come up with something like that.
Because you, like someone like yourself, like you answer a lot of questions, and I'm sure you get a lot of the same questions. So having some sort of FAQ, you can just send to them, right? So save yourself time, and then also save them time as well.
Yeah, and that's like a goal for like YouTube and such as well. Like just film videos with answers, for the most frequently asked questions. I think like the roadblock that I run into is correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people are probably coming to you, like, yes, for nutrition, but they're looking for programming and everything, where people come to me for nutrition, but like my programming is a huge part of it as well. So they don't think to ask these questions when it's through the program. Also on the fact that we think nutrition is like the most important thing out there, which obviously it's crucially important, but it's in conjunction with a training program. And so like, that's something that I need to, you talked about communicating with your clients. That's what I need to communicate possibly a little better, is like, look, this workout program is like, it's going to promote a lot.
It's like, in my eyes, it's like number one in terms of, if we're on the topic of building muscle, like the stimulus is going to be your number one factor to getting the results.
100%. Right. And like, if you're not hitting that stimulus, because you're not, they're not achieving what you're expecting out of that exercise, whether it's 5 sets or 3 sets or whatever. If they're not hitting that stimulus, well, you can't just make up for it with more food, right? Or you can't do the other spectrum either. You can't like eat more food and get away with it because you're doing more sets, kind of thing. It doesn't always work like that. So it's that online portion is quite difficult when programming for clients, especially if you're not and for me, like, I don't know if this is something that you run into, is let's say somebody has like a scapula dysfunction. Most of the time you can pick that out through photos. The odd time though, there's that individual that it only really shows up under heavy load. And if you can't see that, then you could be programming the wrong exercises. And so that's where I think it's also very beneficial for clients, online clients, to send their workout videos. I stress that so much, but like going back to it, I understand people are anxious and nervous to do so, but only very beneficial.
And then in terms of like the scapular dysfunction, that will eventually lead to pain, and then the person will communicate with you on that, and like you'll have to address it, or you'll have to, in most cases, kind of decrease the weight. So well, and I think with that pain too, they kind of like associate, I need to go for massage, or I need to go for chiropractor, and that's not what we do. So that they don't think to relay that to us. Right? When it's like, okay, well, there's something in your training program that is creating this pain and dysfunction that we can work around and make better. And so I think like, it's just going back to your volume and everything. A lot of people don't understand that like 4 sets isn't just 4 sets when it comes to equating in volume. It's like exactly what you said. It's like, okay, where was your RPE? How close were you to failure? How many times did you go to failure? And that's going to increase the volume. So if we had to put that in a standardized number, if it's like, okay, the volume says 4 sets, but you went to failure twice, we're looking at like 6 sets. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. And, we all want to work as hard as possible in terms of building muscle. So I think, it's awesome that you kind of have that frequently asked questions and you lay it out. Okay, this is what I'm expecting from that individual to help bring them that best result. Even like today, I trained Sid before I came in for this podcast. and I had 3 sets of 8 dumbbell press, and the first set was supposed to be an RP 8. She went to a 10 because we end up using like too heavy of a load. So instead of doing that same weight again, I just pulled back on the load 5 pounds and I adjusted the subsequent sets so that we were still kind of staying in with that desired stimulus that we wanted for that muscle group. Whereas if she was by herself, she might have just kept that same weight and then went to failure 2 more times kind of thing. So like,
that's what I used to religiously do because you feel bad that you like failed like too short.
Yeah.
So you just keep pushing through it. Okay, I got 10 reps. Well, I'll go down to 8. Well, now I'll go down to 3. You just keep trying to push through it. So I definitely get that. So let's say you had somebody that you had 5 prescribed sets and they hit failure on the 3rd set. Would you lower that weight and keep going, or would you count that as stimulus achieved?
I would. So let's say that on the 3rd set, they hit failure, and I have a rep range prescribed between 8 to 12, and they hit an 8 rep range on that 3rd set. I would probably decrease the load to ensure that the subsequent sets, they would still stay within that 8 to 12 rep range. Because likely if we were to repeat that same weight, they wouldn't be getting the 8 reps. So that's how I kind of modified. I try to keep the person within the rep range.
When I have people, like, we'll obviously get there, but I'll just like comment that when I have people in a caloric deficit, I'll cut it at 3. Because then that's where volume is a little different. But sometimes in hypertrophy, I'll also cut it at 3, depending on the individual, like what's their capacity for recovery and whatnot. So, so your first thing is volume, right? You equate volume and stuff. How do you go about exercise selection? What exercise do you choose to whatever that person's goal may be in terms of hypertrophy?
So number 1 is like picking exercises that the person likes, because people that like exercises, like their program, they're more likely to adhere to it. And then number 2, I like to kind of pick exercises that target the intended muscle groups that give the least amount of fatigue. So we try to get the greatest stimulus for that muscle group, but also at the same time giving us the least amount of systemic fatigue. So systemic fatigue is more of like it's more kind of brain fatigue, the kind of fatigue that leaves you feeling a little burnt out, a little bit run down. We want to do our best to kind of get the most amount of stress on that muscle tissue while being able to recover from that session. So if we have too much systemic fatigue, recovery will be a lot harder. So you could probably comment more on that too. But
so would you mean like you're doing less compound movements, for example, or?
So we're doing definitely, there's compound movements included in the program. However, I'm very careful with what type of compound movements I'm choosing. What I've found over the years of training myself and training other people, barbell movements and movements that tend to load the spine more kind of axially, like a barbell back squat, a barbell deadlift, a barbell bench press, they tend to have a greater systemic fatigue cost than something like a leg press, like a pendulum squat, exercises that are more internally stabilized. So definitely we're doing lots of compound movements, but they're generally for someone just solely interested in hypertrophy. We're going to be minimizing the amount of barbell work, and we're going to be focusing more on machines, dumbbells, and cables, just because of that kind of fatigue cost that I was referring to earlier.
Yeah, and the research is pretty obvious at this point that the more stable environment you have, the greater output of hypertrophy that you're going to get. And that's one of the reasons being is because when we look at hypertrophy, it is more of a cellular response rather than a central nervous system response. So if you have to try to stabilize yourself a bunch, that's a lot more CNS fatigue, calling upon that rather than calling upon the cellular level of that muscle. So that's why, like you mentioned the pendulum squat, you're fully braced, right? You're fully braced, dorsiflexion, so you can get wicked lengthening of the quads, which research also shows is very important for hypertrophy. But just having that stable environment, you're gonna get way more output, so you're gonna hit that threshold that you're trying to achieve. And so now going off to that,
I want to talk one more thing on that point, because people assume just because you're using machines, there's no stabilization required. Your stabilizer muscles are still working, just not to the same extent as if you were doing a free weight exercise. So it's not like they're just like shutting off and they're doing nothing. They're still working, and like you can still be a functional human being if you're only doing machines, dumbbells, and cables. You don't need to do free. Obviously, there's benefits to it, and like it can be applied to many different populations. However, if someone tells you like that a machine isn't functional, I would call bullshit on that, because it can be just as functional as any other exercise.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that. I think too, the problem is like people will listen to this or like another thing, and they'll kind of argue that. But remember, we're talking in context of hypertrophy. We're not talking in context of calisthenics and CrossFit, and we're talking in context of what we believe is the most optimal way to build muscle tissue. And requiring less or having that more stability means you can focus more on that intended muscle group. So yes, in a pendulum squat, calves are being hit, glutes are being hit, right? Glute med, all that stuff is being hit. But to what degree you're going to be able to bias more to the quads rather than other muscles? Because like you talk about a back squat, a heel elevated back squat. You know, if you have like really messed up hips and you're bouncing all over, you know, you're shifting as you're coming down, or you're shooting your butt straight back as you go to lift out of the bottom, like there's not going to be a ton of, you know, quad bias. Or what's really cool about machines too is like I just created an execution video for a heel. Like if you want to really bias the quads, you have to drive the knees forward. But what do most people do when they squat? Straight down. Right?
They'll bias to the most easy way to perform the exercise. So they'll shoot the hips back, use more of the hamstrings, glutes. And like, as I said, becomes more challenging, they're more likely to just naturally kind of go away from the targeted muscle. But like I imagine you're about to say is like with machines, you're stuck on a strap. You have no choice.
Yeah, especially like that pendulum squat. Like you're say goodbye to your quads. Like glutes can't save it. Yeah, that's exactly it. Because you can push all you want. Your hips aren't going to go back any further because the pad's stopping you. So it's all quads.
Yeah, it's good trades.
Yeah, so that's where machines are. And like, you know, people argue, okay, well, look at Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ronnie Coleman, and all them and whatnot. It's like, okay, yes, strength is going to potentiate the ability to grow more muscle because you're going to get more output from that exercise, whether it's a free weight or whether it's a machine. And so, yes, deadlifts and squats and all that kind of stuff are going to contribute to hypertrophy in an indirect way by increasing strength. But it is now like you can't really argue it now that you don't need to do a barbell squat to get big quads. You don't, right?
And two, you can still get stronger with machines. You can still progress on strength with machines. It's not like you can still do sets of 5 on the pendulum if you want. I'm not saying you should do that. However, if you want to, like, you can still develop neurological efficiency, strength with machines.
100%.
It's probably going to be easier to do because there's less technical demand from a machine than it is from a free bar. If you're a power lifter, though, you have to bench, squat, and deadlift.
Yeah, it's part of the competition.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot safer too,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
So if you want to maximally load and all of a sudden that pendulum squat comes crashing down, you have safety and stuff. Yeah, of course you have safeties on squats too, but you get people that come to the bottom and that weight is too heavy. Who knows what they're going to do? They're going to shoot their knees out. They're going to, you know, their back's going to
roll it over their head.
Yeah, who knows, right?
I remember when I was like 19, 20, and I was squatting like 400 pounds to a high box. So like I was quarter squatting, like 4 plates. And I remember just getting pinned in the bottom, the head rolling forward, and like the bar rolling over top of my head. And like, then it didn't faze me at all. Like, so it's like, I was totally fine. But if I did that now, like, paralyzed or something, snap. So when you're younger, you can get away with that shit. But you got to think long-term with these things too.
Well, I got 2 funny stories on that. So like, Sean, we were doing squats one day and I set up the safeties and I told him because he just cannot go to failure. It's just psychologically, he feels like a pansy. He hates himself for it. I'm like, dude, this is the point of this, right? And he just can't do it. It's kind of awesome, you know, like just watching him, like he'll push through any weight. But so I loaded up the bar and I said, man, you got the safeties. Just go to the bottom. If you can't come up, just set it down on the safeties. So he gets down to the bottom. He goes to come up, he can't get it. So instead of setting it down, he rockets it forward. Squat rack almost takes out all the mirrors and everything. It's just like a pendulum going back and forth. I was like, my heart was like, my face went red. It was at Good Life Fitness when I first met him. I was laughing so hard afterwards. And then when I was younger and first getting into lifting weights, well, at a gym, it was a gym in Red Deer, it was the first time by myself because normally I was going with my friend Alex, and I went on the incline bench press and I got stuck under it and then I couldn't get out. And then so I rolled it down to my hips, but then I couldn't get out of there and I finally got out, and then I went to put it back up on the rack and I couldn't do it. So I said, I went home. Like, to hell with this. And I go back to the gym for like a week after that. I was so embarrassed. Yeah. But that's why too, yes, machines, like, you know, they are safer. There is less, you know, I mean, you still can get injured, but there is less risk of injury. But I like I said, I personally feel what you were commenting on. I think you can get a much better output for intended muscle using machines rather than using free weights. Like to grow quads, I'll never use a barbell squat. Right? Not saying never. Actually, not saying don't ever do it, but I will personally never use a barbell squat.
Yeah. Even for myself, like I rarely use a barbell. Like every now and then I'll have phases where I'm like, okay, I want to reintroduce the barbell movements, but when I'm training them, I'm usually leaving 8 or 10 reps in the take. So it's just more of a technique thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'll do them in a like a strength phase, right? Because sometimes it is fun to squat.
100%. Yeah.
Right? Until you see the woman next to you doing more than you, then it's like, oh, but it's still telling me,
it's yourself.
Yeah, Stu, I'm never doing squats again. But so now, when you talk in terms of hypertrophy, do you use periodization?
So yes, I use some form of periodization.
Okay, so if you could, let's elaborate a little bit on, like, for those that don't understand, what is periodization?
So periodization is a way in which you manipulate training variables to prevent kind of stagnation in terms of your results. So like we discussed this earlier. It's like if you're doing the same program over time, let's say you start a new program, the amount of work that's required to make the adaptation early on is going to be a lot less than it is 4 or 5, 6 weeks later, because the body becomes resistant to the stimulus that you're giving it. It needs to have more stimulus to make results. So rather than doing more and more and more and more, because eventually you get to the point where you no longer can recover, you switch up the training stimulus. And in terms of hypertrophy, there's so many different ways you can achieve hypertrophy or muscle building. Now we can actually drop down the total amount of work that we can do to start making progress again towards our goals. But if we do the same thing repeatedly for months on end, likely we'll just end up spinning our tires, maybe run into some overuse injuries, some aches and pains in the joints, those sorts of things.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that explanation. And because like what I add to that is I also look at it as potentiation. And so what I mean by that is, so like with what Matthew, for those that understand what Matthew was explaining, is like, you know, looking from a cellular response, you have like a bar. And the more you do that same workout, that bar is going to get higher and higher and higher, meaning you have to get over that bar to get adaptations. But as you mentioned, you're going to run out of recovery. And so once that bar exceeds the recovery bar, then you're not getting adaptations. So by you switching the training program and doing something else, that bar is now coming down, leaving room for adaptations. And so where I use potentiation, for example, is especially, so in the context of hypertrophy, I really like training the liver and how you would perform that. So like a workout would look like A1, A2, A3, and you have 4 sets, so all superset, and then rest 60 seconds. And so my client and I, what did we just do? It was a prone incline dumbbell lateral raise with a rear delt row and a bicep curl. So she did 10 to 12 reps of each exercise, rest 60 seconds, did that 4 times because we were accumulating acid more globally. It's also lower volume because you're not taxing that same muscle repetitively like you would a straight set. And then you'd have B1 and B2, which would be like a hack squat with a lat pull down. And you rest anywhere from 60 to 90, depending on the individual there. And then C1 and C2 would be the short version of that. So you would do a leg extension with a lat row, for example, and rest only like 60 seconds. And what this is going to do is you're working multiple tissues simultaneously, creating acid more globally. And as long as you're within that bar of recovery, this is going to cause the liver, or force the liver to flush that acid. And in doing so, it's going to make mitochondrial more efficient. So your liver gets better at using fat as a fuel source, so use less stress hormones. So like relative to life, that's amazing because we're all stressed. But in terms of like hypertrophy, that's going to help you recover not only faster between sets, but faster between workouts as well. And you can watch people, like I monitor via their heart rate in those systemic phases, and you'll see as they progress that their heart rate gets lower and lower each time. So then that's when now we can increase the stimulus because you are adapting to this. And so that's what I use.
Yeah, and what Curtis is saying there is like essentially he's just making the person fitter. And being fitter is going to allow you to do more work in subsequent phases of training.
Yeah, and especially because like we talked about cardio at one point and like the importance of cardio during a hypertrophy phase, but cardio is so goddamn boring. So I would rather use something like a systemic, like even sled pushes. Like even sled push is very systemic. It's very systemic, but I think where people go wrong is they'll do sled pushes one day and then like quads the next day. And it's like, well, you have to equate those sled pushes to your volume because they'll look at high intensity interval training as cardio, which I mean, yeah, like you're taxing the cardiovascular system, but this is also volume on the muscles that you're using to perform that HIIT cardio.
Yeah. So like people that don't do a ton of cardio, typically when they do the cardio, something like a HIIT, the biggest limiting factor is going to be more muscular than it is actually going to be cardiovascular. So the people who are more fit and conditioned, more endurance-based athletes, it's the opposite for them. Muscularly, they have no issues, but they'll fail cardiovascular. So you like you're saying, like you're almost getting a strength or hypertrophy-based signal from the HIIT session because those muscles aren't ready to do that work.
Yeah, and yeah, as long as people take that into account when they're doing their volume, because most people don't, right? They'll train something in the morning and then do cardio at night, which is HIIT training, and then wonder, struggling why they can't recover or get the results that they're looking for. Because I think a lot of people don't understand that HIIT training is quite a bit of volume. It is quite a bit of volume.
You look at cyclists, guys that are like really, really well known for like their ability to climb hills. They have massive legs. They are lifting, but I think most of their volume is coming through cycling, and particularly like sprints, interval-based training.
Yeah,
like they have ginormous quads, and some of them probably don't lift any weights.
Yeah, I have a friend in Australia, and I don't know how to ever fully explain it, so I say he's like the Tour de France type bike guy or whatever. And he's Australian. His name is Matty, and he has got these ginormous legs. Like I remember when he came to Canada, he worked at Good Life for a bit. Yeah, it's just massive. But that's all he did was bike. Right? And like when he lifted in the gym, it was just nice casual lifting. And I think I was talking to him recently. He said, he doesn't even work out now. It's just all biking. But then it's like the opposite of me. He's got like this really tiny upper body and then now these big ass legs, right?
I don't know. I feel like I'd prefer that. Just have massive legs, like genetically or just based on the sport that I'm doing, because upper body is much easier to grow.
Yeah.
Than lower body.
It's less weird.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Psychologically, it's a lot harder to go to failure and do the hard kind of base training on lower body versus upper bodies.
Yeah, and you do have some individuals though that crave it, but then I've always had, like, I'm sure you've had this in your experience. You've had like a woman say that I love leg day, and then you put her through a leg day and they don't love leg day anymore. It's not
real leg day.
Yeah, it's not just kickbacks and booty band walks or whatever, right? It's like, no, we're gonna load you on a bar or put you in a pendulum squat or whatever. Yeah. And going back to the systemic training, I always love this little fact that a lot of people are not familiar with, that because a lot of us tend to get sick when training legs. And that is like, I would do 3 sets of a V squat back in the day when I'd actually do a V squat, and I would get sick. And my trainer would always laugh at me and everything, and I didn't understand. And, I thought this guy's just a pansy or whatever. It's your liver. Your liver can't deal with the accumulative acid, so it sends it down the bile duct, and then we throw up to get rid of it. And so that's another reason why I would do systemic training. So if somebody can't take themselves through a leg day that is required to reach that threshold to stimulate hypertrophy, we will pull them out and do systemic training, improve that liver efficiency, or like from a nutritional standpoint can be done as well, right? But how I look at it is, if you're on the topic of cars, nutritional strategies to improve your liver is doing an oil change. But training strategies to improve your liver is adding a turbo. or bigger pistons or just more power, more horsepower, whatever attachments you need. That's how I look at it. So like we have this engine, we can either make this engine much more efficient, or which we're going to make this engine efficient and then we're going to make it bigger. Right? And that's kind of like why I do systemic training, especially before like a hardcore hypertrophy phase.
Yeah. And I just started training someone new recently, and so to avoid that kind of like the nausea-based sensations, the feeling sick with leg day training, I'll do a lot more kind of isolation-based exercises rather than the compounds because they create a lot less lactate. So
yeah,
let's get like the individual muscle groups stronger, functioning better from the mitochondrial level, and then maybe start to incorporate more kind of compound-based exercises as they become healthier, as they become fitter, as they lose weight.
Yeah. And I love that you said from a mitochondrial level, because a lot of people, that's when you talk about, because there's a lot of flack for shortened position exercises. And what I mean by that is a shortened position of the quads is a leg extension. That's where the muscles contracted the shortest. We'll keep it simple. And then a pendulum squat is the lengthened, right? They'll say like, you don't need to do leg extensions for hypertrophy. They say that doesn't help with hypertrophy, and actually AMPK, because we've had this conversation a lot, can actually shut off an mTOR response.
That drives me insane when people say metabolite based training or pump based training doesn't lead to muscle growth, because it fucking does.
That's exactly
it does.
Even if it's not directly within that training session. So that's where I was going with the mitochondria. Like when you perform that metabolic pump training, that improves from a local standpoint. So you do biceps, you do a pump workout for biceps, your biceps have now become more efficient at using fat as a fuel source, which improves your capacity for recovery, which improves your output, your glycogen retention, right?
And what does that mean? It means more fucking size.
Exactly.
More mitochondria, more ribosomes, more water, more ions. Like a muscle's bigger, right? So
yeah, and functionality. It's functionality too. So like what I mean by that is you'll have individuals, let's say their lower trap is just not working properly, and they try to do like a Y raise and they can't get their arms there because the scapula is not depressing and retracting due to lower trap dysfunction or something along the lines of that. So you go do a costal pec press in the shortened position, because that costal pec fiber is synergistic to that lower trap. So now that costal pec fiber is more functional, that lower trap could probably work better. And I see it all the time. I'll do like Y raises on a bench. And I'll do this, and I'll always say to somebody like, oh, look, my chest, it's tight as I'm trying to lift. I was like, okay, well, what's your first instinct? Well, should I stretch my chest? I said, no. I said, we're going to work your chest. Strengthen your chest. And then they go, so we do a costal pec press, and they come back to that Y raise. They don't feel that tight chest anymore. We didn't do any stretching. We work that chest. And so I think shortened position is also very functional as well.
And because if you look at most physiotherapists, what do they prescribe? 3 sets of 10 to 15. What does that sound like?
Yeah.
Bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Hypertrophy. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then you talk about even injury recovery, like the occlusion training, right? I'm not saying people go and do occlusion training. It's kind of dumb. It definitely doesn't bring in hypertrophy results, but injury recovery, because you're holding so much more nutrients and blood into the muscle, helping with the inflammatory process, that it actually can expedite healing. It's 100% proven that it does not help with hypertrophy. Like people can't just like, tie their legs off and hope for massive quads.
Just tie their legs off and like just sit at the desk all day.
Yeah, I tell you what. I mean, they'll be big, but from like swelling and everything, and then amputee. But no, so like I agree with you. I think that doing that metabolic style training, maybe you don't have to do it within that session, but like potentiating with that by having more glycogen, by having more local conditioning of that muscle tissue, so you can get greater output in your true designated hypertrophy programs, But even like you look at the squat superset with the leg extension, it's just equated volume. It's going to stimulate hypertrophy. And so
you're hitting different parts of that muscle. So like you said, with the pendulum squat or a heels elevated safety bar back squat, like you're challenging that lengthened position by complementing it or pairing it with a leg extension. Now we're challenging that muscle through its full range of motion. So to me, it just logically it makes sense, and just in practice, it works. I don't care what the research says.
Well, that's the good choice of word. There's a big difference between research and application, right? There's a big difference, and there's so much context involved with both application and research. And like, that's what Sydney and I were talking about on the podcast, where we were laughing at people who read research and all of a sudden they try to like spit it out like this. And she's like, I have a PhD in there. She was like, it's not as simple as just reading the research. Like, there's so much involved.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Like, as a trainer, like, yes, it's good to understand research. However, like, it's reading research is pretty much its own profession.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the things within a research, all the parts to it, the methods, the stats, the interpretation, the population study, like, all these things need to be taken into consideration when determining how am I going to apply this to the real world. And like, I've kind of tried to understand it, but like I said, it's very complicated, and I don't know where I'm going with this, but
well, essentially it's like we were talking about the shortened position exercises, metabolic training not contributing to hypertrophy. Let's just say yes, it does.
And it's like,
knock it out of your
understanding research is very hard to do. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Like, in researchers, most researchers don't really train, and then most trainers don't really do the research. So I think people should just stick to their lanes.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah. So what would be an example of a hypertrophy program for one of your clients? How would you structure that? Give us a push day.
We'll do a push day for sure. So let's say that we're gonna do 5 exercises, right? So generally speaking, I like to kind of start off with more of a compound based exercise. So it's to say like something that challenges the muscle and more the length and position. So a dumbbell chest press, right? Just a flat dumbbell chest press. 3 to 4 sets of 6 to 10 reps. And then I'm not going to get into the intensities, but
yeah, that's fine.
What we talked about earlier, right? So that's challenging the muscle, kind of its more length and position. The following exercise for the chest, I'll try to pick something that kind of biases more of the middle to short range. So that's where I like to use something like a cable or a machine. So the hammer strength machines that most gyms have, they're really good at biasing more of that middle range, kind of short range. So that first exercise, it targets more of the lengthen. Second exercise kind of targets more of the middle to short. So kind of complementing the entire range of that muscle. And then lastly, I like to finish off with some sort of more kind of isolation based exercise. So whether that's like a machine pec fly, a cable pec fly. So for like a chest based workout, that's usually only need 3 exercises in my opinion. Obviously there's different circumstances where you can do more. However, that's kind of the basic structure that I like for someone starting off. And if it's a push day, we're likely going to include some sort of delt based exercise. So in that case, it's going to be either like an overhead machine press or an overhead dumbbell press, and then some sort of medial lateral raise. So either a dumbbell or on a machine. And then we could throw in a tricep exercise. So that ends up being 6 exercises, but the tricep exercise, we can target it either in the shortened position or the lengthened position. Generally speaking, I like to just choose kind of one tricep exercise for one push day. And then maybe they'll have another arm day throughout the week, just depending on the schedule and all those, so many things to take into account. But that's kind of the structure I like. First exercise, lengthen. Second exercise, middle to short. And then third exercise, more isolation based. And then there's a lot of varieties you could have within that too. I could have the isolation exercise first, biasing more of that short position. I could have the second exercise that I mentioned, the hammer strength machine press or chest press. I could have that first. It all just depends on the situation and the person that I'm dealing with, and also comes down to some of the things that you talked about prior in terms of the potentiation effect. What phase are we training? What kind of stimulus are we trying to prioritize here? So with the lengthened position with the dumbbell press, we're going to be biasing more of that lengthened position, which is going to kind of cause more of the inflammation, more of the kind of muscle breakdown. This is going to result in more of the creation of the actual contractile tissues, the myosin and the actin. Whereas something where we're biasing more of the middle to short, we'll be getting more of kind of that metabolic stimulus. Something that Curtis mentioned earlier was like we'll get more kind of glycogen in that area. We'll be challenging more of the mitochondria, the cardiovascular system, those sorts of things.
Yeah, and I think too, like with where you, so like you said, you do all the chest or whatever, you can get away with less tricep and anterior work because those are being taxed in your chest movements.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
We might only need one tricep exercise instead of doing 3 tricep exercises.
Yeah.
But if it was an arm day, then we'll probably be doing 2 or 3 tricep exercises, 2 or 3 bicep exercises, and maybe a delt. Or just all depends on what the person needs. If they're competitors, like what does their body need to develop to do well on stage? But generally speaking, with most people, that's how them start is some sort of dumbbell movement, machine movement, and then isolation. And I do kind of an ascending rep scheme. So a little heavier with the dumbbell press, a little less heavy, so more reps on the machine, and then more reps on the isolation-based exercise.
Okay.
It's like 12 to 15 on like a fly, 8 to 12 on a machine, and then a 6 to 10 or 6 to 8 on a dumbbell.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I like that. That's good.
And there's like 8 billion ways you can program for hypertrophy. Like it's one of the most forgiving base stimuluses. You can do so many different things to get hypertrophy.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the programming, yes. In terms of the execution, no. Because that's where it's like all reps count. So if you like, especially if you're an advanced trainee, like a newbie, you can come in and have the worst looking technique and have the worst program and you're going to get results. That's exactly why the fitness industry is so trash, right? Because all these newbies, like myself included, oh, that worked for me, right? And it's like, look how fast I gained muscles. Like, yeah, you never lifted a weight before in your life. Like, you know what I mean? And so, but advanced trainees, that's where the execution is really, really important. And that's where you do need to get into like more technical programming and potentiation and everything, because that threshold will never be the same as when you were a newbie.
Well, Dr. Mike Israel kind of talks about this. Like the more advanced you become, the smaller the margin for progress is. So your minimum effective volume to make progress is much closer to your maximal recoverable volume. So you have to be really dialed in with everything.
Yes.
Whereas a newbie, like their minimum effective dose is way over here, so they can essentially do anything and they're making progress.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's what, like, any newbie that may be listening is, you don't need to go in and do a workout that Matthew just explained. You could do a quarter of that in the beginning and get the results.
You could just do the dumbbell chest press, paired with a dumbbell row, and like maybe even like that's where like the full body days are important. I think really useful for someone first starting, because then they can practice the movements more frequently.
Yes. Yeah, so that frequency, I think,
to
is
get
really
better
good
at execution, like you talked about.
Yeah, because then once they have that down, then you can start, but I think what happens is these people come in and they go on, these sites, or they get a workout program, generic workout programs, and it's just like excessive volume. Like it's excessive volume. And I think the reason that these generic programs are constructed like that is because it's going to compensate for, like we spoke about, people that don't work hard, right? People that come in there and are kind of just like, enjoying their coffee and conversing with people and then go and lift some weights. You do enough volume, you're going to get the results.
You just have to keep in mind, like, that is true, but then most people aren't giving themselves enough calories to actually make progress. So yeah, they might be doing enough volume to hit that threshold, but then you're doing more work. You got to fuel that extra work. Means more calories. People who are lazy in the gym, they're usually lazy outside the gym in terms of meal prep, recovery, sleep. Yeah. And then they just look the same like 20 years later. So
yeah. And so I think that's all to do with context, but I do say, like, newbies, you don't need to do a lot. Like, you definitely don't need to do a lot.
Even like I'm working with a guy right now, and like I'm kind of mentoring him a little bit in terms of just personal training, and I asked him, like, can you put together a workout plan for yourself, and we'll go over it together and we'll talk about it. And like on his chest day, he had like 8 chest exercises, and I just like X. Like I brought it down to like 3. Like you don't need to do every single chest exercise. You can rotate them in. You might do 4 to 6 weeks of one exercise, and then you might start getting stagnant on that exercise, and you bring another one in. Like, you don't have to be doing everything all at once.
Yeah, and so that just brings to my attention. So when we're talking about like changing the stimulus so you're not exceeding threshold and recovery and everything, that doesn't mean doing a pendulum squat for 8 to 10 reps and then doing a barbell squat the next time. It's the same thing. You're still taxing that same genomic response. You're still taxing that same cell. So what we mean by potentiation is like changing the rep scheme, changing the rest periods, all that kind of stuff, because that's what people believe too. They think, oh, well, you're supposed to switch up your exercises. So they'll go do, a walking lunge and then a leg press the one day saying, oh, I switched up my exercise. No, you did the same thing. You called upon the same gene. You hit that same threshold. It's not like the potentiation or where you talk like deloads. Deloads don't have to be less work. They could just be metabolic training rather than hypertrophy training. You can still work your ass off, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I think is important to understand, because you can do a hack squat for hypertrophy, systemic, and metabolic. It's how you set it up.
It's so true. I'm really happy you brought that up, because you don't have to change exercise. You can just change the rep range. You can change the execution. You can change the tempo. And if the hack squat or the pendulum squat is an exercise that's working really well for you and you're responding well to it, and you don't have any lingering knee pain, hip pain, back pain, there's no need to change it out, because it's like, in my mind, it's like kind of the gold standard for leg growth. Keep that baby in as long as you can, and like, because it's such a great exercise.
Yeah.
Unless you're getting so bored of it, like that you're not going to come to the gym again.
Yeah, that's different. There is that aspect too.
But yeah,
right?
So
a good example of what Matthew means by like the pendulum. So let's say you want to do metabolic. If you want to get really technical, let's band it. Let's put a band on it. And
what does that do?
So when you look at the way a pendulum is designed, okay, actually the one at King's is kind of reversed. So it actually gets easier at bottom because if you look at gravity, because now the weight's here, gravity's here, and then as you come up, gravity feeds more on it. So that one's a little backwards, but when you look at Predator, I think is a good one. So what happens is if you're going to band it up, what that means is you're going to add less weight. So when you get to the bottom, you can handle the weight at the bottom, but as you come up and the band starts to grab, tension's going to increase and you're going to attack more of that middle range. So that's one application to banding. Or like you look at a half squat with reverse banding. If you want to hit more of the mid range, keep those inflammatory levels lower, treat it more as metabolic, you're going to reverse band it. So the band is going to take weight when you're at bottom, but as you come up, so like you're not going to get stuck at bottom, and as you come up, that band is going to release, adding weight, if that makes sense. It's kind of hard to explain over like podcasts, but
it makes sense to me because I obviously understand it. But another way you can do that is just by modifying the tempo. So rather than exploding out of the bottom of a pendulum squat, you go a little bit slower, it takes the momentum out, makes it harder as you're coming up.
Yeah, my pushback to that, the only reason why I wouldn't always do like a slower concentric is because, especially when you get closer to failure, the way the human body is, it will start to pass off. So like, let's say you're getting into the quads, it can start to pass it off to other muscles and it'll be less biased to the quads. So there's actually a lot of EMG showing that. And so like banding is something that like, I don't know why I brought it up because a lot of people don't understand banding, but it's just an example.
Let's move on from that.
Well, so what I wanted to say was, so like changing it. So if you banded a pendulum squat and you did 12 to 15 reps, 30 to 45 second rest periods, that is going to be metabolic. You do a normal pendulum, you got a nice 4-0-1-0 tempo, so a nice slow eccentric, anywhere from 6 to maybe even 12 reps, depending on the individual, that's hypertrophy. And then you go in, you add a buttload of weight, you take some long ass rest periods, and you do maybe 5 reps max, that's going to be more strength. And so that's how you don't need to switch from the pendulum. You can just change
the pendulum, how you're doing it,
the reps, all that kind of stuff. And so that's where I think, that's an important piece of advice for people is you can do the same stuff. If you love a pendulum squat, keep doing the pendulum squat, just change up your rep range, your rest periods, and your tempos is what you can do. And then that, once again, is periodization. So you can lower that bar and get more out of your hypertrophy.
100%.
So now how long would you keep somebody in a hypertrophy phase?
So if it's someone who just wants to essentially build muscle and lose fat, that's kind of most people that I work with, I would keep them in hypertrophy phase forever.
Okay.
Some level, like the goal of the phase is to essentially build more tissue. Obviously there's phases where we're going to have like more of a neurological biased phase where we're going to have more strength, where we are kind of deloading in some capacity in terms of overall volume. However, I know what you're asking me, but it's essentially we stop the phase when the progress begins to stall. And we we base that on different factors, whether that's images, the person's like psychological well-being, how are they sleeping, their digestion, how are they able to tolerate their food, like all these different things is going to dictate whether or not we need to change the stimulus. Because eventually you get to the point where you're doing so much work, you're eating so much food, maybe your digestion becomes impaired, maybe you're training so hard, so heavy that your sleep starts to become impacted, your recovery starts to decrease. So in most cases, that can fall anywhere from kind of like 3 to 8 weeks is typically when I'm switching the program. But the general goal is going to be hypertrophy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that goes back to, the more muscle you have, right? Just everything, never mind fat loss, hormone production, energy, vitality, right? Obviously, to a point, there's such thing as too much muscle, but
100%. For the general population person, though, like muscle building is, like, in my opinion, the best stimulus they can do for themselves in terms of longevity.
100%, yeah.
And a lot of people think that strength is the number one factor, which it is, strength and power, but for most people, if you just build muscle, that will build sufficient strength and power alongside of it. You don't need to do necessarily specifically power-based phases or strength-based phases. You don't need to lift 1 RMs or 3 RMs. Like, you can get enough strength just from hypertrophy training, progressing at 8 reps, progressing load at 10 reps.
Yeah, and also as well, when you build true contractile protein tissue, it's actually very hard to lose.
That stuff sticks around.
Yeah, unless severe inflammation and severe caloric deficit, that stuff sticks around.
And if you do lose it, I really believe it's really easy to regain too.
Myonuclei. You can lose muscle tissue, but you don't lose a ridiculous amount of myonuclei, which is, think of it as the blueprints for muscle building that you've already created. Right? I use health markers for sure. So if you have somebody that's been pushing a lot of food for a long time and like digestion, blood pressure, whatever it may be, insulin resistance, then let's go into a fat loss phase. Even if the goal is still hypertrophy, even if I still, like, this individual still wants more muscle, still wants bigger delts, whatever, if they're reaching this, okay, like, your blood sugars are getting quite high, as you mentioned, sleep is impacted, you're getting kind of bloated or whatever, maybe let's go into a caloric deficit now, improve some insulin sensitivity, take some stress off the digestion, kind of reset you, and then we can go back into hypertrophy. But if you have somebody that doesn't really run into that stuff, like, I know people like Cody Moxley, for example, that guy's always running hypertrophy phase, man. But it's the way he goes about that hypertrophy phase.
He's one of those people that he doesn't train emotionally. He trains very objectively. He follows the plan to a T. Whereas most people, they push too hard too soon, so they hit that wall much faster, myself included. But I feel like you get a lot more benefit running these slower, longer based programs in terms of hypertrophy.
Yeah, because I've always said it's not about what you do in the gym, it's about what you recover from. So if you can't recover from it, you're not going to get these results. It doesn't matter how many drugs you run, trust me. You're not going to get these results. You just can't work harder and make it up by eating more food and taking more drugs. It doesn't work like that. You're right. It has to, unfortunately. Otherwise, it'd be like these huge mass monsters everywhere.
All the gym bros would be like 400 pounds.
Yeah, right? But no, so that is important that, like, taking your recovery into account. And that's, your sleep, optimal foods. I just made a post before we started the podcast, 5 not so sexy tips for fat loss. I mean, this applies to muscle building as well. Get out in nature, decrease your stress hormones, right? Hang out with people you enjoy, like just social bonding. Those are the kind of things that are going to help you prolong certain phases, whether they're hypertrophy or whether they're fat loss, because it doesn't matter if you're trying to burn fat or build muscle. If your stress is so high, that stress goes on top of that threshold of training. And then if you exceed that bar of recovery, you're not getting those adaptations.
Yes. I made a similar kind of reel about this. I haven't posted yet, but like, what does being hardcore mean? And everyone assumes like hardcore means like training hard and like grunting on your sets and like doing more work than everyone else.
Drinking
like,
egg whites.
Drinking egg, like carrying around your gallon water with you at all times. or whatever, like blowing blood vessels in your eyes. Like, to me, the hardcore shit is the stuff that's not sexy at all. It's going out in nature. It's turning off Netflix and going to sleep and like preparing your meals and hanging out with your friends and all those things that are so important and underrated for building muscle. There are some people that just are genetically more gifted to build muscle, so they can take drugs, eat food, just train, and that's all they do. But for most kind of middle of the bell curve based genetic individuals, they need to do everything. It doesn't matter how hard you train in the gym, like you said, if you don't recover and you don't take into account all the other things that go into building muscle and losing fat.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand too, like I'm not in no way, shape, or form saying these people don't have problems, but when you have made riches off of your physique, like the top Olympia guys, that's all they do.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to work.
Mm-hmm.
Their work is training,
Mm-hmm.
is preparing for the Olympia. They got their contracts though.
Mm-hmm.
They got hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. They got their supplement line. Like, yeah, I'm not saying they don't work hard, but they don't have to go in and, you train at 2 different gyms,
Mm-hmm.
and then you got to come back and create programs for your clients,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you got to look after yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so like trying to fit, and then you're creating social media content, and right? They have the necessary means. They're paying people to manage their supplement companies. They're paying people to manage their social media. And they're literally just eating and stuff. So it's important to take that into context too, of someone who is like on social media comparing themselves. Okay, like, yeah, Big Ramy can run this excessive workout program because all he does is eat, train, and sleep.
Yeah.
That's all he does.
That's such an important piece. So yeah, because people don't realize that, like, that is their job is lifting. Some of these guys don't even like to lift. But I, like myself, I love lifting. Like, I wish I was in their shoes, but I just, genetics, right?
Yeah.
But it's if a pro or someone like that you're admiring is following a 5-day split, but you're working a 60 hour per week job, you have a family, you might be only able to train 2 or 3 times per week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
And that doesn't mean you're not going to get results.
100%. You can still make great progress on 2 or 3 times per week, but just like more isn't always better.
That's exactly it. Yeah, it's everything. You have to take everything into account because talk about volume. That's volume too, right? That's what I mean when I talk to people about volume, and they're like, oh, like you just need to do more to get the results or whatever. It's okay, well, let's look at your execution, okay? Because you can get more volume simply executing a movement better, okay? Let's look at your stress. Oh, you haven't slept for more than 5 hours a night in the last 6 months? That's a lot of volume, right? So it's, you have to take that on. It's like, building muscle is not easy.
It's not.
When people say, I build muscle easily, shut the hell up. You do not. No offense, not trying to sound like an asshole, but especially when women say that. Yes, as you mentioned, there are genetic outliers out there.
Yeah.
Right? And women, where they think they build muscle, they have higher levels of estrogen in the caloric surplus, so they store more triglycerides, they store more minerals, they can uptake a little more glycogen because estrogen does help with insulin sensitivity. But obviously strength, but more estrogen also could potentially mean more inflammation, which means less muscle building. And so what you're building is temporary. And this is why you see some individuals, they do a whole off season or whatever, and they come back on stage and they're only a pound heavier. So they only gained a pound of tissue in a year, of contractile tissue in a year. It's because everything they were doing was that temporary, whether it's that sarcoplasmic tissue or whatever, because they were way too stressed out. So the more food and training just increased androgens, and they started filling out a shirt. So I build muscle easily. No, that's your swelling and bloat from having too high of androgens from your excessive training and poor sleep, right? Or your high levels of estrogen. I ran testosterone. Look how big I am. Yeah, of course, a little bit, but what's your estrogen at? Yeah. Right? You got dido when you're crying. Like, that ain't muscle tissue that you're building. So
that's the same thing too of people who abuse insulin. In an off season, they might put on 50 pounds in the off season, like they think it's lean tissue, but then they cut down for stage, and like they said, they might be only up a pound or 2, and what the fuck?
And they got diabetes out. It just blows my mind when people say that, because more muscle tissue. We talked about it, longevity, hormone production, caloric expenditure, all that stuff. It also is not a key for survival though. Because why would you want to expend more calories? There's no pressure for us to evolve. So it's not like we don't know that we have unlimited food. So our bodies don't want to build more muscle tissue. It will prevent anything. Where you build muscle tissue, this is why execution is a really important factor in that no reps off. Because you are stressing the muscle where it is like, okay, look, I don't want to do this from an energy standpoint, but from a survival standpoint, I need to improve so I can handle this trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you look at it from a biological standpoint, is you build muscle because your body's like, man, you're an asshole and you keep beating me up. I need to withstand this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why people even with shitty workout programs and shitty nutrition can still build muscle when you do something long enough. Because over time, your body's like, all right, I got to do something about this, you know? But that's why I like the argument with like carbohydrates and muscle building, where they don't think carbohydrates are as important. Okay, maybe not like, you know, you're not going to like completely ruin your results by not eating boatloads of carbohydrates. But in order for you to create that muscle tissue, especially as a natural individual, you need to bring that cell back to energy balance.
Mm-hmm.
And that requires food.
And I also, a good point, I heard about this a long time ago, and I thought it was kind of important, is just having a bigger muscle, even though it might not necessarily be kind of the myosin actin actual contractile based tissue, that extra size can help you kind of maybe gain leverage that will then in turn allow you to apply more tension to that muscle group, so that you can build more strength, then hopefully lead that to more actual contractile based tissues. So someone like myself who's kind of longer and lankier, having a little bit more volume on board can help me kind of press more weights, do more on like pull downs, like it can just make me stronger as a person, changes my leverages.
Yeah. And then like on the topic of like, cause like you are a bigger guy and having more muscle and everything, this is important to understand as well. I kind of mentioned this earlier. Someone's 5 reps is a lot different to someone else's 5 reps. They're going to get a lot more done.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to like follow a newbie's workout program, an excessive newbie's workout program, you'd probably be thrashed,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's why I tell people I have so many health issues. I just have so much muscle that I create so much inflammation. But all seriousness, the more muscle you have, the more potential you have to create inflammation,
Mm-hmm.
which yes, inflammation is a driver of hypertrophy, but you have to resolve that inflammation. So if you're creating such excessive amounts, because like going back to like Big Ramy, like his 3 sets on leg extension is probably 15 for me. You know what I'm saying? Like there's just so much more tissue to contract and create a stimulus. So the bigger you are, once again, it goes back to that advanced trainee. There's, you know, sometimes you got to get into a little more technical things.
And he might be able to do more. He might be doing 15 sets, but he's also doesn't have a job. He's taking 3 or 4 naps a day. He may have the genetics like to the point where he can recover a lot faster than a normal human can. But 100% agree with the fact that the programs, if I were to follow a newbie program, I would be fucking destroyed. Like a 5x5 on a back squat or something.
Yeah.
To like an RP 8 or 9, like
Yeah.
I'd be wrecked.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you just get more done with less work, the more muscle tissue you have.
it's more efficient.
Yeah, more, and same with neurological.
Yeah.
The more neurologically efficient you are, the more, once again, this is why potentiation, periodization, strength training,
Mm-hmm.
because the more neurological efficient you are, the more you're going to get done in that movement,
Mm-hmm.
which also leads back to stability as well. Yeah. So those, like, I think the key takeaway points for hypertrophy is recovery. Mm-hmm. So caloric surplus, right, is as you mentioned, volume. Now, I think it's important to understand that volume is not just sets and reps. It's tempo, it's density, it's rest periods, it's, you know, all that. It's, we talked about this previously. You do chest, there's going to be a little bit of volume in those anterior delts.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a little bit of volume in those triceps. So if you're looking at, well, I need 8 sets of triceps. So you go and you do a tricep crossover with like a, I don't know, overhead dumbbell extension, 4 sets each. Oh, there's my 8 sets. Well, you just did 5 sets of a chest press.
Mm-hmm.
So there's tricep volume.
Mm-hmm.
So you probably only need 4 sets of a tricep crossover.
Yeah.
And that's actually hitting your 8 sets of tricep stimulus. And I don't think people understand that.
I tried to, it can get very complicated and very complicated. And like back in the day, I used to try to like equate for that. Like I'd count like a chest press as like a quarter of a tricep set or half a tricep set. And like, that became way too much, just like it's over the top. But I like kind of how you're explaining it. Like if you need 8, maybe you only do 4. And then you can always start lower and you can always adjust based off of that.
Yeah, exactly. If you're not getting the results that you're looking for, as long as execution is good,
As long as
food is and sleep is there,
Yeah.
then increase your volume.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say step 1. If you're not getting results, look at your execution, okay? Look at your sleep and look at your food.
Mhm. And 99% of people will realize it's one of those things.
Yes.
And they don't need to add more shit because people do way too much already. So
Yeah, and like, because I know like you're a big component of, especially when it comes to drugs, starting less and working your way up if need be.
If on an as needed basis, correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Testosterone is not going to make up for your, as much as you want, for your shitty sleep, your shit digestion. It's not going to make up for that.
In most cases, it will make it worse. It's more burden on the body. And like Curtis talked about before, it's going to be more of that fake muscle. You add more testosterone and you'll get more glycogen retention, more changes to the actual cells. But once you come off that testosterone, you're losing that artificial tissue. It's not going to be contractile tissues.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because like Leo and I were talking about this yesterday in the podcast about how natural individuals actually come in a lot more conditioned than enhanced individuals, because they are dealing with more, like enhanced individuals are dealing with more inflammation, higher levels of hormones, unless, they're really taking them and everything. But as a natural individual, if you do all the right things, you can look much more conditioned than enhanced. You just don't have the size.
Yeah. I argue that just a little bit, not against you, but like
T3 enduretics.
It's more that happens at the amateur level. At the pro level, those guys are coming in just as peeled and nasty as the naturals. We have the naturals, they can come in way more diced than a lot of the...
I think for a lot less work, I find.
Okay.
Because there's a lot less stress on their body. So for example, like when you're talking about dealing with that inflammation, and that inflammation is going to cause that water retention, so they have to do a lot more diuretics, we'll say an example. Where a natural individual, right, they're going to have less inflammation, so they're not going to maybe even need diuretics. Well, they can't do diuretics if they're in the natural division, so I learned yesterday.
And dandelion root?
Yeah, dandelion root too. Put your legs above your head. Yeah.
The naturals, caffeine.
Yeah.
And a thing in the enhanced world is a lot of people butcher it because they think it's estrogen. So they crush estrogen, which estrogen, as we know, it does have some water retentive properties. However, with high androgen level, or when we're using a lot of anabolics, our aldosterone levels tend to increase, and people don't address that, and that's why they come in watery and filmy. And
that's because of the androgens, because those androgens will convert to aldosterone.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why using something like an ARB can be very effective. Not only it manages your blood pressure, but it helps to manage your aldosterone levels.
Yeah. But it's also as well as like high androgens themselves will lead to that swelling and that inflammation and whatnot. So then it all works in conjunction. Like it's, okay, well, if those high androgens are leading to this, so then I'm going to have to control those androgens. Well, where are they going to go? This is what I made in my hormone thing, because people think, especially like women with polycystic ovarian syndrome, because they're high androgens, they'll take saw palmetto, stinging nettle, inositol, metformin, whichever. Well, it doesn't just magically disappear. Where does it go? It goes to estrone. And then that can go to estradiol, or that can go to estriol, but then it's got to get detoxified.
And then that's all the stuff you're taking is more stress on the liver. And that's where I think in the enhanced world, less drugs typically produces a better look on stage.
Yes.
You don't need grams of gear prepping for a show. You just need enough gear to give that kind of hard, kind of cosmetic look, but you just need enough also just to maintain the muscle.
Yeah, that preservation.
The preservation, which is actually not as much as people think it is.
Yeah, exactly. I think more guys, like the high amounts would be to maybe build that muscle coming up to prep.
100%. Yep.
But yeah, once you go through prep, because your liver is already strained enough via just a caloric deficit, right? And then now you're throwing other things on top of it, and it's just more work for it. And then things don't get detoxified, right? But then we take things like aromatase inhibitors. Oh, well, you're having estrogenic symptoms. Remember, estrogen does help with insulin sensitivity.
Helps you lose fat.
Yeah, right?
Very important for mobilizing fat, for protecting your heart, kidneys, brain.
It's so important.
Joint health.
Yeah, and like, so you talk about it like we want to go, like high estrogen causes that lower abdominal fat retention, or what do they call a spare tire? So does low estrogen, right? So does low estrogen.
So that inverted U we kind of want. We just kind of want to be in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't want to be out here taking your estrogen, which is going to happen anyways, a decrease in estrogen via a caloric deficit. So that's another thing. This caloric deficit is causing a decrease in estrogen, so then they just take more things on top of that to try to decrease their estrogen, because they think that's what's causing water retention and swelling and whatnot.
And you get most guys who get really peeled, they have no body fat. And like, where's aromatase stored? The thing that actually converts testosterone into estrogen. It's in the fat. Like, you have very little aromatase when you're that peeled. So it's like, you're just taking aromatase. I think people overdo the aromatase inhibitors.
Yeah.
When I got my last show, I was using no AIs, aromatase inhibitors.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Hard, peeled,
Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. I don't, unless there's like some sort of big genetic trait occurring, most people don't need AIs. They need proper detox.
Mm-hmm. And they need to get lean enough.
And lean enough, yes. Yeah.
Which comes into the detox.
Yeah.
If liver's not functioning, it's hard to get lean.
Yeah, exactly. As I say, I put a YouTube short on yesterday. I'm like, stop ignoring detox. Detox is fat loss. Because as you burn fat, you're releasing toxins out of that adipose tissue. And if your liver's already struggling, it just gets recirculated.
Yeah. And like, there's so much negative connotation associated with detox. However, when Curtis speaks about it, it's like actually, he knows what he's talking about. It's not like just follow some detox-based tea program.
I got some skinny tea in the cupboard.
It's some bullshit like that. Like, it's a loaded word, detox.
It is. It's and that's why I like to use, like we talked about, like the word flash. But even that gets it too, because then you're like, oh, I don't feel like shitting my pants all day. It's like, it's not what it is. You should have formed bowel movements within this protocol, right? So it's one of those things. But you're right. It's crucially important. It doesn't matter what your goal is, whether it's fat loss or hypertrophy, like liver, your organs need to be optimal and whatnot. So it's not just as simple as pounding in a bunch of drugs and doing excessive training. Like, trust me when I tell you that. I've experienced that firsthand. Unfortunately, it does not work like that. So it is like, look after your recovery, look after your sleep, make sure your nutrition is good, make sure you are happy and managing your stress. And then even bad workout programs will probably be half decent for you, right?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the optimal program without all those other things is going to be worse than the shitty workout program where everything else is kind of dialed in.
100%.
It's more holistic.
100%, right? Well, I always say, what's that saying? You can't out-train a bad diet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you also can't out-diet bad training, right? So saying that kind of falls in lifestyle, right? Yeah. Like, you can't just out-train poor sleep, Netflix till 2 a.m, on your phone 24/7. You can't out-train that. You can't. So those are probably, like, when people are looking to achieve hypertrophy, sure, we started talking about programming, but that's the stuff that you really have to focus on, making sure that I'm doing all this, because as you mentioned, a less than perfect training program will yield better results than a quote unquote perfect training program with poor recovery.
And then you do those things and you hire someone like myself or Curtis and boom, you're a pro.
Yeah.
You're all a couple months,
Exactly. That's a great sales pitch. Okay. So yeah, like, that's the terms of hypertrophy. So hopefully this is like some information you guys can take away to actually help apply to get better results that you're looking for, because as we discussed, building muscle is quite difficult, or it can be quite difficult for some individuals. So I think Matthew is a wealth of knowledge in this. Obviously, he's done amazing for himself, both with building muscle and getting lean and competing and everything, and just the background he has and helping other individuals who, like Sydney. If you guys have watched the previous podcast with Sydney, she went on to set a national powerlifting record. That was really cool to hear. It was a great conversation with her. So, like I said, you're a wealth of knowledge. And so do you have anything to add to this before we close out?
No, but I think it'd be also good on the next podcast to, like, we can actually maybe go over some examples of a hypertrophy program kind of on the whiteboard.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's I was like contemplating like how we would set that up or whatever, but we'll just do it like a YouTube video style kind of thing, and then link it, and then people can go into that, because that'll probably make a lot more sense than just trying to write everything down as we're chatting and whatnot. And so we should do that, and then like I said, we'll book another time and talk about fat loss, because everybody loves fat loss. So.
Spoiler alert, it's not much different.
Yeah, it'll be a quick one. So, well, thank you for your time, Matthew. I appreciate it. Thank you for your knowledge. And I hope you guys enjoyed that, and everybody take care. Yeah.